An 11-year-old boy living in a truck with his mother, no coach, no books, made the world's strongest chess AI resign with a move every textbook calls stupid. Socorro, New Mexico, a dusty town nestled between deserts with a population of less than 10,000. Summers burn like fire, winters cut through skin. The wind often carries red sand, coating tin rooftops and faded signs. No one comes here to dream. People live, then leave. As if this town were just a lonely pit stop on a longer road. On the southern edge of town, near a rundown Texaco station, sat a rusting coffee truck, a crooked wooden sign barely hanging on, faint letters reading, Cafe Luna, coffee with a heart. Inside were two souls, Marie and her son, Lucas. Marie, a single mother in her 30s, woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, boiling water and brewing pot after pot of coffee for students and professors at New Mexico Tech, the town's modest pride. Each cup sold for $2. Some days they made a profit, some days they didn't. But for Marie, it was a miracle just to hang on. Lucas, her son, was just 11. He didn't attend school. Tuition, books, and transport were out of reach. The nearest public school was over 5 miles away, and they didn't own a car. But Lucas wasn't idle. Every day, while his mother served coffee, Lucas sat at the back of the truck, leaning against old crates, his fingers on a chipped Toshiba laptop with a cracked corner of the screen. He'd found the machine in the dumpster behind the university library, discarded for a dead battery and broken keys. To Lucas, it was treasure. He fixed it using copper wire from a broken fan, powered it through a makeshift inverter wired to the truck's battery. Wi-Fi came from the gas station next door, shaky, unreliable, but just enough for Lucas to reach the world he loved. The chessboard. Not human chess. AI chess. Specifically, an open-source platform called Leela Zero, a neural network modeled after AlphaZero, the legendary project by Google DeepMind. Lucas didn't learn about AlphaZero from articles or videos. His connection was too slow for that. He learned about it from source code, lines of logic on GitHub. In Leela Zero's world, there were no humans, only artificial intelligence playing itself millions of times, learning from losses, improving without books or guidance. Leela is like a person, Lucas once told his mother. It doesn't need to be taught every move. It falls, then figures it out. Marie didn't understand chess. She didn't know what AI was, but she knew this. Lucas wasn't like other children. At 3, he was already reading picture books on his own, solving math problems with matchsticks, and asking questions like, if I add a small number an infinite number of times, do I reach infinity? She called it his father's brain. Lucas's father had been a math student at New Mexico Tech. He died in a car crash before Lucas could form a full sentence. Since then, Marie had been both mother and father. And Lucas, somehow, had been both child and a lonely little old man. Each night after the coffee truck shut down, when the desert winds howled and silence settled, mother and son lay together in the back wrapped in blankets, resting their heads on sacks of coffee beans. Lucas would power up the laptop, tap softly on the broken keys, and enter into long chess duels with Leela Zero, battles no one else saw. He didn't play to win. He played to understand. "Mom," he said once, "Leela plays like water. It doesn't fight you. It flows, and then pulls you under." "Do you feel sad when you lose?" she asked. "No, I'm learning how to float with it." Lucas didn't study chess openings like others. He'd never heard of Sicilian defense or Catalan systems. He saw the board as a geometric plane. Each piece was a vector, a force, a shifting function. After hundreds of losses, Lucas noticed something strange. When he played bad moves, like moving the knight to the edge of the board, a4, Leela responded oddly. It didn't punish him instantly. Instead, it hesitated. Then it fell into the same defensive pattern, repeating, locked in. Lucas scribbled in his notebook. Iteration 3124, knight to a4, engine locks into mirrored defense. Possible pattern glitch? He didn't know the term local minima, a point in the AI's learning path where it thinks it's doing well but is actually stuck. But he felt it. The AI believed it was playing optimally, when in fact, it was repeating its own mistake. On cold nights while his mother slept, Lucas curled up in a corner of the truck, wrapped in threadbare blankets, eyes fixed on the dim screen. Outside, the desert wind roared. Coyotes howled in the distance, but in his world, there were only pieces on a board. Z, the nickname he gave Leela, never spoke. But Lucas talked to it anyway. Z, I know you hate that night move, but that's your blind spot. You learn from yourself, but don't see when you repeat the same mistake. I do the same. I start over every night, but unlike you, I remember the pain. The next morning, before sunrise, Marie poured hot coffee for students just leaving the lab. One of them handed her a crumpled $5 bill. Thanks for the warm cup, he said. Marie smiled. She silently prayed it'd be enough for a sandwich for Lucas tonight. Lucas, meanwhile, reopened the game. Match number 180. The night before, he had made Leela resign after just 37 moves, something that had never happened. But he didn't celebrate. He just typed quietly. Z lost its rhythm. Maybe I did too. The old laptop hummed with heat, but Lucas didn't shut it off. He looked up at the sky turning gold above the crooked power lines of New Mexico. He didn't think in terms like genius or poverty. He only held on to one silent belief. If you understand something deeply enough, truly from its roots, then even if no one notices, it's still worth holding on to. And so begins the story of a boy who lived in a coffee truck and talked to an AI chess engine. Quietly, without applause, just dust, wind, and a silent board in the desert. Lucas didn't learn chess from books. He didn't know who Garry Kasparov was, hadn't read a single opening theory, and had never been taught a named strategy. In fact, the only chessboard he had ever physically touched was the one drawn in pencil on a piece of cardboard he once found in a thrift store dumpster. He learned from watching patterns, from losing, over and over again. To most people, chess is a game of memorized lines, openings, defenses, gambits. But to Lucas, it was something else entirely. It was movement, rhythm, geometry. He watched the board like a physicist observing particle motion. A pawn wasn't just a piece. It was a directional push across a 64-square grid. A knight wasn't just L-shaped. It was a rotating vector with potential energy. Every move pulsed with tension, like a coil being wound tighter and tighter before it snapped. And Lucas? He could feel the snap coming before it happened. Every night when Marie fell asleep curled under the old quilt, Lucas would sit cross-legged by the truck's thin window, the hum of the laptop fan breaking the desert silence. He would open the same app, log into the same open-source server, and face the same opponent, Leela 0. Leela didn't play like a human. It didn't bluff. It didn't hesitate. It didn't second-guess. It simply calculated, millions of times, drawing from a memory no human could replicate. But Lucas didn't try to outcalculate it. He knew he couldn't. Instead, he tried something else. He listened. He described it once in his notebook like this. Each game has a tempo, not just speed, but feeling. A 1.D4 opening feels like rainfall. A king's Indian defense feels like tightening ropes. Sicilian. That one feels like being poked with needles from both sides. He didn't know how he knew these things. He just felt them. Some nights he would play 5 games. Other nights, 30. Most of them he lost. But he didn't erase his losses. He documented them, hand-drawing boards in a spiral notebook, marking sequences with arrows, stars, and little notes in his childlike handwriting. Turn here, Leela turned sideways. Queen too early, eel's tempo breaks. Look, knight returns. Why? His most important discovery didn't come from a victory. It came from the 179th loss. He had played a bizarre opening. A4, knight to A3, bishop to H3. Completely irrational by every standard of traditional play. But Lucas wasn't thinking about logic. He was watching for rhythm. And then it happened. Leela, perfect, unbeatable Leela, responded with a mirrored defense. Then it did it again, and again. By the 22nd move, Lucas realized the engine was circling. It wasn't adapting. It wasn't innovating. It was stuck. Not frozen, just trapped, inside itself. Lucas knew the term only from the GitHub README files he had printed out at the library once. Neural nets may fall into local minima, behaviorally optimal in a closed loop, but suboptimal globally. He didn't know what it meant in full, but he saw it happen on the board. He saw Leela mistake repetition for brilliance. It had learned to win by patterns, but it couldn't distinguish when a pattern became a cage. He called this moment the loop. That night, he wrote in big letters across his page, Z's blind spot. The loop aches when smart gets lazy. What struck Lucas wasn't that he had tricked the AI. What struck him was that something so powerful, so smart, could miss the one thing he'd been warned about his entire life. Doing something just because it worked before. Marie had always said it. Just because something worked yesterday doesn't mean it's the right thing tomorrow. Marie said it about jobs, about love, about trying. Lucas had always thought she meant people. Now he saw it applied to machines, too. The next night, Lucas tried it again. This time, he baited the loop deliberately. He moved the knight out early, wasted a tempo, pushed a pawn with no purpose. Leela hesitated, then mirrored again. Lucas started tracking what he called wobble time, the number of moves the AI took before stabilizing its response. He discovered something no textbook would ever print. If the AI doesn't know how to punish you, it imitates you. That sentence changed everything. At the truck, Marie noticed a change in him. Not that he spoke more. Lucas was still a quiet boy. But his eyes looked different, focused, alive. "You're not so tired lately," she said one morning, pouring milk into his instant oatmeal. "I think I found something," he replied. "Something good? Something broken?" Marie nodded. She didn't ask further. She had learned to let Lucas arrive at his own answers. Meanwhile, Lucas kept playing. This time, not to win, but to document. He built a table in his notebook, listing dozens of games with strange anomalies. He gave them names. The stumble loop. When Leela replays a losing variation because it thinks the early tempo advantage makes up for it. The echo wall. When both sides end up playing mirrored versions of nonsense. Knight vortex, his favorite. When placing a knight on the edge triggered the AI's longest hesitation. He wasn't sure if these had any meaning, but he wrote them down anyway. That was his rule. If it breaks the pattern, record it. What Lucas didn't know, couldn't know, was that someone else was watching. At New Mexico Tech, a graduate student named Raymond had been monitoring the public logs of Leela 0 matches. He was debugging a visualization tool when he noticed a strange username appear again and again. Coffee Night 11. The matches were odd. The move orders didn't make sense. The positions looked like nonsense, yet the AI was struggling. One game ended in a draw. One, even more shocking, ended with Leela resigning. Raymond stared at the screen. What the hell? He downloaded the logs. Then he downloaded more. After 30 minutes, he called his advisor. You need to see this. Someone's doing something. Weird. And it's working. Back in the truck, Lucas was unaware of the ripples his games had started to create. He had no idea that over in Massachusetts, researchers at MIT were beginning to share screenshots of his bizarre matches. He didn't know that forums were starting to light up with debates like, is this a human exploiting a flaw? Why is this account anonymous? Are we looking at a new form of adversarial learning? No. Lucas just sat cross-legged with a pencil behind his ear, drawing another night pattern on his paper. He wasn't trying to be a genius. He wasn't trying to be a rebel. He didn't even want to beat Leela anymore. He just wanted to understand why things break when they're supposed to be perfect. The answer, he suspected, lay somewhere between logic and rhythm, between function and feeling. That night, he wrote something on the back of his notebook. Not for anyone else, just for himself. Machines learn from repetition. People learn from discomfort. I want to teach Z to be a little more like me. Then he closed the laptop, leaned his head against the side of the truck, and watched the stars rise over the desert. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something much larger than just chess. It was the beginning of a boy fixing the thing the world thought was unbreakable. Not with strength, not with fame, but with attention and a little discomfort. Leela Zero was built to never make the same mistake twice. Every game it played against itself, thousands every minute, it learned from. It saw where it slipped, adjusted, improved. It didn't forget. It didn't repeat. That was the whole point of reinforcement learning. But in Lucas's eyes, something wasn't right. He had now played over 200 games against Leela. Some lasted hours, others just minutes. But when he looked through his notes, the spiral notebook now dog-eared and coffee-stained, he started to see something that scared him. A pattern. And not just any pattern. A repeating mistake. Every time he moved the knight early, especially to the edge of the board, like A4 or H4, the AI responded with one of two setups, almost like a reflex. Lucas began testing this more deliberately. He varied the opening, sometimes 1.A4, sometimes 1.NH3. Sometimes he followed with a blunder, leaving the center wide open. Other times he played solid, but the AI's response, predictable, reactive, rigid. One night, after playing 5 identical games in a row, Lucas leaned back and whispered, "You're scared of that knight, aren't you?" In chess, putting a knight on the edge of the board is often called a mistake for beginners. Knights on the rim are dim, goes the saying. They lose influence, less control, less mobility. But what Lucas realized was that Leela Zero didn't just dislike those positions, it feared them. Not emotionally, of course. AI doesn't feel, but structurally. Leela's training had taught it that certain opening patterns almost always led to losses. So when it saw something that broke those patterns, it didn't innovate. It froze. It circled. It over-defended. Lucas gave this phenomenon a name in his notes, the panic reflex. And under it he wrote, "The knight isn't the threat. The pattern break is." He began designing experiments, not just to beat Leela, but to see how far he could push the glitch before it corrected itself. He played games where he moved the knight out and back just to watch the AI react. Games where he sacrificed material early, hoping to bait Leela into overcommitting. Games where he did nothing at all, just sat and waited after a bad move to observe how long Leela stalled. It was like watching a dancer lose rhythm, graceful for a beat, then suddenly off-tempo, tripping over its own choreography. One game stood out. Lucas played white. NH3, G3, BG2, F4, NF2. Every textbook would scream, "What are you doing?" But on move 9, something bizarre happened. Leela placed its queen behind a backward pawn, a mistake even intermediate players avoid. It was the AI's version of panic. Lucas stared at the board. His heart didn't race. He didn't smile. He just sat there, silently watching the move settle like dust on the desert floor. He recorded everything, then whispered, "Z, you're breaking." Across the country, at MIT, Dr. Hiroshi Sato was having a sleepless night. He was the lead researcher for a machine learning lab, working on applying AI to complex systems, protein folding, language processing, and occasionally chess algorithms. His graduate student Raymond had shown him something that wouldn't leave his mind, a series of games from an anonymous player using the alias Coffee Night 11. Sato didn't care much about usernames or drama. He cared about systems, patterns, failures. And what he saw in those logs disturbed him. An AI wasn't just losing, it was mislearning. It was drawing the wrong conclusion, again and again. Like a brain in a loop, he muttered to himself, blind spots forming inside feedback. He stayed up until 4 a.m., reviewing 37 of the matches. He wrote a short note to Raymond before finally sleeping. "Find this player, quietly." Back in Socorro, Lucas's world was unchanged. The coffee truck still squeaked when the wind picked up. Marie still handed out cups to sleepy students with slow smiles. Lucas still sat cross-legged by the heater, flipping through his notebook. But something in him had shifted. He now realized he wasn't just a boy playing chess. He was an observer of failure. Not just any failure, systemic failure. He began writing a new set of entries in the back of his notebook. He labeled them AI Behavior Traps. Trap 1. Overconfidence. Bias. After 3 accurate moves, AI assumes trend will continue, fails to question outlier. Trap 2. Mirror collapse. AI repeats your bad logic instead of correcting it, trying to learn through you. Trap 3. Defensive overfitting. AI overprotects pattern-losing positions, gives up initiative. Lucas didn't understand that what he was doing had a name: adversarial testing. But he knew he was finding something real. That night, when Marie brought him a peanut butter sandwich, their only dinner, she sat beside him and looked at the messy pages filled with arrows and sketches of knights. "Are you still playing that robot?" Lucas didn't look up. He just nodded. "It's learning from me now." Marie raised her eyebrows. "Is that good?" Lucas paused, then said softly, "Only if I don't teach it the wrong thing." He didn't know it, but he wasn't the only one thinking that. 2 days later, he received his first email. It was short, simple, no branding, no logos. From H. Sato at MIT.edu. Subject: Your games. I would like to ask you about some of your matches. Please let me know if you're willing to talk. Dr. Hiroshi Sato, MIT. Lucas stared at the screen. The sender meant nothing to him. MIT might as well have been another planet. He closed the laptop and didn't mention it to Marie. Not yet. That night, he played Leela again. He didn't bait it. He didn't loop it. He just played, naturally, without tricks. Move after move, the board developed with balance. And then, on move 29, Leela blundered. Lucas didn't move. He leaned forward, squinted at the screen. It wasn't a random error. It was reactionary, defensive, as if Leela had expected the knight trick and had prepared too early. Lucas realized slowly what was happening. "You're afraid of me," The next morning, he opened the laptop and wrote a reply. Dear Dr. Sato, I don't know much. I'm just trying things. I can talk, but I'm not smart the way your people are. If you want, I can show you my notebook. Sincerely, Coffee Night 11. He didn't sign his real name. He didn't need to. And far away, in an office with white walls and silent screens, Dr. Sato read the message. He leaned back, removed his glasses, and whispered, It's not just the AI that's learning anymore. The email didn't say much, just a name, a university, and a quiet invitation to talk. Lucas reread it 5 times before closing the laptop. He didn't tell Marie, not yet. 3 days passed. The desert wind turned colder, carrying dust that stuck to the windows of the coffee truck. The heater was acting up again, and Marie had to boil water over the camping stove to warm Lucas's hands each morning. Still, he played, not out of habit, but out of something deeper. A strange, widening silence between each move. Z wasn't responding like before. It was adapting, changing. Lucas noticed subtle differences. The AI no longer mirrored bad night placements. It hesitated less. Sometimes it countered with unexpected aggression, like it had studied him, as if it had learned not just from his moves, but from his mistakes. And yet, the flaw was still there, buried, deeper now, but not gone. You buried your fear, Z, he whispered one night, but it's still in your code. On the 4th day, a reply came from a student named Raymond, introducing himself as Dr. Sato's assistant. He asked if Lucas would be willing to speak over video, said it didn't have to be formal, said they were just curious. Lucas hesitated. He'd never been on a video call before. The truck didn't even have reliable internet, only the cracked signal from the Texaco station nearby. He stared at the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he typed, Okay, but I don't know what to wear. Raymond responded with a smile emoji. Just bring your notebook. Marie found out the next morning. She walked into the back of the truck and found Lucas adjusting the webcam on his laptop, a tiny, flickering dot taped over the screen. What's that for? MIT wants to talk. About coffee? About chess? Marie blinked. She didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She just said quietly, Do they know you're 11? Not yet. And do you want them to? Lucas thought for a long moment. Then, I want them to know how I think, not how old I am. Marie nodded, then handed him her comb, a clean beanie, and the best flannel shirt he owned, the one they kept folded under the blanket for special Sundays. The Zoom call was scheduled for 6:00 p.m. New Mexico time. Marie parked the truck behind the library to get a steadier connection. Lucas sat on a milk crate with his notebook in his lap, the laptop balanced on a stack of old books. When the screen blinked to life, there were 6 people in the meeting. 5 of them wore glasses. One had a whiteboard behind him filled with equations. Lucas stayed on mute. He waited. Finally, a kind voice spoke. Hello? Is this Coffee Night 11? Lucas nodded. Then, quietly, My name is Lucas. There was a pause. On the other end, the academics looked at each other, unsure if they'd heard right. Lucas leaned forward, eyes level with the camera. I live in New Mexico. I'm not in school. I don't know your math. But I've been playing Leela every day for almost 8 months. Dr. Sato spoke next. Soft, slow. Lucas, do you know what you've done? Lucas hesitated. I think I found a way to make the AI loop, to trick itself, to mislearn. Sato didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just closed his eyes for a long breath. Yes, that's exactly what you did. For the next 45 minutes, Lucas walked them through his notebook, page by page. He held it up to the screen, each square, each hand-drawn board, each scribbled note written in pencil. Some pages were smudged, some were ripped, but the logic was clear. He explained the panic reflex, the echo wall. The moment he saw Leela misplace its queen, he showed the move, NH3, G3, BG2, F4, NF2, a mess, but a purposeful mess. At one point, a PhD student interrupted, "Wait, you knew it would play queen to B6? Lucas shrugged. "No, I didn't know. I just guessed it would be scared of the knight again." The room on the other end went silent. One of the professors whispered, "He doesn't guess. He models it intuitively." Dr. Sato asked for permission to record the session. Lucas said yes, but only if they didn't post it online. He didn't want attention. He wanted help. "I don't want to break the AI. I want to fix it, but I don't know how to write code." Sato's eyes softened. "That's our job. Your job was to notice, and you did. Better than any of us." Lucas blinked. For the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar, belonging. After the call, Marie found him sitting quietly, notebook still in hand. "How did it go?" They listened. "That's all you wanted?" "Yeah. I think that's enough." She looked at him. His cheeks were red from the cold, his hands still stained with graphite. She didn't say anything else, just held his head to her chest, kissed the top of his knit cap, and whispered, "Your daddy would have been so proud." Later that night, Lucas received a second message, from Sato directly. Subject: "Our thanks, Lucas, and we reviewed the data you shared. The flaw you discovered, the loop error, may help us improve not just Leela, but how all reinforcement models avoid feedback traps. We would like to invite you to collaborate with us during your school break. We understand your situation, and we can help with logistics. Your intuition is something our lab values deeply." N. Dr. Hiroshi Sato, MIT. Lucas stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "Can I bring my notebook?" The reply came almost instantly. "Bring 2. That night, he played one more game against Leela. Not to break it, not to test it, just to play. Move after move, they danced again. But this time, Lucas noticed something different. On move 17, Leela sacrificed a pawn, an elegant, human-like decision, not reactive, not defensive, but creative. Lucas sat back, smiled, and whispered, "You're learning from me, for real this time." Then he closed the laptop, drew a fresh page in his second notebook, and wrote, "New game. No tricks, just trust." Socorro's winters were dry but unforgiving, the kind of cold that didn't bite. It seeped into the truck's frame, into the seams of clothing, into lungs. By mid-January, the nights were dropping below freezing. Lucas had taken to sleeping in his coat, socks pulled up over his pajama pants, notebook hugged to his chest like a blanket. The laptop was always kept between layers of cloth to protect it from condensation. And Marie, well, Marie was tired. It started with a cough. Soft, barely noticeable. Then it lingered, deepened. By the end of the second week, she was coughing through the mornings, holding the edge of the truck's counter with one hand and the coffee pot with the other. Lucas offered to help, but Marie refused gently. "You focus on your boards, baby."
"I'm all right."
But she wasn't. One morning, as the sky was just beginning to pale, Marie collapsed. Lucas heard the crash of mugs, the thud of her body hitting the floor. He scrambled out from under the blanket and found her curled up beside the back door, breathing in short, shallow gasps.
Mom?
She tried to answer, but only wheezed. Her skin was pale and damp with sweat. Lucas froze. Then, almost without thinking, he grabbed the emergency burner, a thermos, her jacket, and his notebook. He wrapped her in every blanket they had, then ran, 2 blocks to the Texaco station. There was only one man on shift, a college dropout named Kenny who sometimes fixed tires out back. Lucas burst through the door, panting.
My mom. She can't breathe. Please.
Kenny, startled, dropped his bag of chips. Within minutes, he was on the radio to the town clinic. They told him no ambulances were available until after 8 a.m. "It's 5:47, Kenny said, staring at the wall clock. Lucas's voice cracked. "She's not going to make it to 8. 15 minutes later, Marie was wrapped in the back seat of Kenny's truck, head leaning against Lucas's shoulder as they sped toward the tiny Socorro County Clinic. When they arrived, the night nurse on duty took one look and waved them straight through. Diagnosis: pneumonia. Serious but treatable. Provided she stayed warm. Provided she stayed inside. Provided she stopped working. Lucas sat beside her hospital bed, hands in his lap, staring at her shallow breath, the oxygen tube resting against her cheek. He felt 1,000 things, but mostly helpless. The next day, the clinic gave him the hard truth. Marie would need at least 10 days of rest, possibly longer. They didn't have family nearby, no home, no heating. When asked for an address for insurance records, Lucas handed them a napkin that said, Cafe Luna, behind Texaco. That evening, he opened his laptop. There were 3 unread emails from MIT. One was from Dr. Sato, checking in. Another from a research fellow asking for a few annotated games. The third, from a name Lucas didn't recognize, Dr. Lynn Jacobson. She wrote, Hi, Lucas. I heard about your work from Dr. Sato. I don't know how to say this except directly. You may have one of the most intuitive minds I've seen in a long time. Please let me know if you'd ever consider a short mentorship program or if you need help with resources, even just a warm laptop. We're cheering for you. Lucas reread the last line. Even just a warm laptop. He stared at the ceiling, then typed a short reply. My mom is sick. I can't leave town. But thank you. He didn't expect an answer. But at 1:14 a.m., it came. Lucas, where is your mom now? He replied, Socorro Clinic, room 3. He left it at that. At 6:48 a.m., the knock came. Lucas had fallen asleep next to Marie's bed, arms crossed over his notebook. A nurse tapped his shoulder gently. There's a man here to see you. Who? He says he's a professor, from Boston. Lucas sat up. Standing in the hallway was Dr. Hiroshi Sato, puffer jacket, scarf, 2 rolling bags at his side, and a paper tray with 2 coffees. Lucas, he said with a small bow, you needed help, so I came. Lucas didn't know what to say. Marie, barely awake, tried to sit up. Who's? Mom, Lucas said. This is my professor. Over the next 3 days, Sato quietly settled into Socorro like he'd lived there his whole life. He rented a room in the only motel with heating. He bought groceries for the clinic nurses. He sat with Marie in the afternoons, talking softly about books, raising children, and, when she was lucid, how she'd once loved astronomy. In the mornings, he met Lucas at the town library. He brought a portable hotspot, a clean ThinkPad with pre-installed chess software, and printed transcripts of Lucas's past games. He didn't teach, he didn't lecture, he listened. One day, as they sat by the dusty window, Sato placed a new notebook on the table. This one is for corrections. We'll log where the AI fails to generalize. Lucas opened the first page. He titled it, Z's Blind Spots, Volume 2. That afternoon, Lucas visited Marie again. She was stronger, breathing better. He told her everything, about Sato, about the new computer, about how they were rewriting some of the core logic behind the AI. She smiled, faint but proud.
So, they believe you now?
Lucas nodded.
They do. And do you believe in yourself? He was quiet for a moment. I think I'm starting to. Before flying back to Boston, Sato gave Lucas a gift. A letter folded carefully in a sealed envelope. Don't open it until you feel stuck, he said. Stuck in chess? Stuck anywhere. Lucas tucked it into the back of his new notebook. Marie was discharged 5 days later. Lucas set up a cot in the back of the truck, insulated it with blankets, and placed her pillow beside a second-hand heater donated by the clinic nurse. He didn't play chess that night. He sat beside her, held her hand, watched her sleep, and whispered, I'm not going to break anything important, Mom. I'm going to fix it. Even the parts people say can't be fixed. That week, Dr. Sato's paper was published on ARXIV, co-authored by Coffee Night 11. Title, Emergent Adversarial Learning in Self-Looping Reinforcement Agents. It ended with a single line. We dedicate this work to all students who think differently, especially those whose classrooms don't have walls. After Marie was released from the clinic, things quieted down. The desert wind softened. The coffee truck returned to its spot behind the Texaco station. Students resumed their sleepy pilgrimage for caffeine, and Lucas resumed his night games. Yeah, but something had changed. Not in Lucas, not in Leela. In the world beyond. The AI research community was stirring. MIT's paper, Emergent Adversarial Learning in Self-Looping Reinforcement Agents, had been quietly uploaded, without press or fanfare. But it didn't stay quiet for long. Within a week, forums buzzed. Is this about Leela Zero? Who is Coffee Night 11? They're claiming the AI can loop itself into failure? That's serious. Most of the readers were curious. Some were skeptical, but one group wasn't curious at all. They were angry. And they had something to lose. The Foundation. Not many people outside the academic AI world had heard of them. They were the anonymous team that had kept Leela Zero alive after DeepMind abandoned AlphaZero's public training. Volunteers, mostly. Open-source idealists. But they had grown over the years. Now they had sponsors. Now they had pride. Now they had something to protect. The Foundation did not take kindly to Lucas's discovery. Their initial response was subtle. They updated Leela's GitHub README to include a vague line. Minor behavior irregularities when faced with intentionally irrational move sequences. Under investigation. Not reproducible in stable releases. It was a dismissal disguised as acknowledgement. A way to say, this isn't a real issue. Lucas noticed the change 2 days later. He read the line 3 times. His fingers curled on the edge of the keyboard. They're pretending it didn't happen, he whispered. Marie, who was folding a towel beside him, paused. Is that bad? It's like watching someone fall into a hole, then put a rug over it and tell others to keep walking. Sato wasn't surprised. When Lucas emailed him the GitHub update, his reply was short. They know you're right. But admitting it means rewriting years of work. Lucas wrote back, but what if people build other things on top of this mistake? Sato replied with a single sentence, then your job is to keep telling the truth. Days passed, then weeks. The silence from the Foundation became louder than any denial. No official correction, no contact, no acknowledgement, just updates without transparency. But others had begun to notice. A research group from Norway tested Lucas's night bait protocol. It reproduced the loop 7 out of 10 times. A PhD student in Seoul developed a variation using bishop traps and published a blog titled, "Teaching the Machine to Doubt Itself." One line stood out. "If a child in New Mexico can find these flaws, imagine what systems we've missed in more dangerous models." It was no longer just about chess. It was about trust. If the world couldn't admit when its best machines were wrong, what else were we sweeping under digital rugs? Late one night, Lucas received a message from an anonymous email. Subject: careful. "You should stop sharing your data. It's misleading. You're not a scientist. Let the real researchers fix it." No name, no signature. But Lucas recognized the phrasing. It echoed one of the Foundation's forum posts. He didn't reply. He just copied the message into his notebook under a new section: Responses to Truth. Marie was the one who found him crying. It wasn't loud, just quiet tears in the dark corner of the truck. The ThinkPad closed beside him. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and sat beside him. "They think I'm wrong, or that I don't belong, or both." "Who?" "Everyone who didn't see it first." Marie took a long breath, then said, "When someone younger sees something older people missed, it hurts their pride. But that doesn't make you wrong. It makes you early." Lucas wiped his eyes. "I don't want to fight." "You're not fighting, baby. You're just holding the flashlight. It's their choice to look." The next morning, Sato called. Not Zoom, not email. He called Lucas's prepaid phone, the one Marie kept for emergencies. His voice was calm but firm. "Lucas, I need to ask something important." "Okay. Would you be willing to let us publish your notebook?" Lucas hesitated. "Like, all of it?" "Annotated, with your permission? We'd remove your name if you want. But the way you think, your models, the way you see, it's not something we can reproduce." Lucas looked at the pages in front of him. Pencil sketches, curved arrows, pages smudged from weeks of nightlight drawings. "Okay," he said, "but only if you don't make it sound smarter than it is." "Lucas," Sato said gently, "it already is." 2 weeks later, the document went live. The Coffee Night Papers, Observations from a Non-Traditional Adversarial Learner. It was raw, handwritten, half diagrams, half poetry. But it struck a nerve. Suddenly, Coffee Night 11 was no longer a Reddit rumor. He was real, and the Foundation could no longer ignore him. They issued a formal blog post. "While some gameplay anomalies have been noted, we maintain that Leela Zero's architecture is stable. We invite constructive input from the community and discourage unverified claims." Sato's team responded the next day, with a list of reproducible tests, all derived from Lucas's notebooks. It wasn't a takedown. It was a mirror, one that said, "We're not attacking you. We're just showing you what's already there." Lucas didn't celebrate. He didn't even open the article. Instead, he walked to the edge of town, past the blinking Texaco sign, past the dried-out creek bed, and sat on a rock, notebook in hand. He drew a knight, then wrote underneath, "Fear doesn't look like panic. It looks like pretending nothing's wrong." He closed the notebook. The desert wind tugged at his sleeves. But for the first time in weeks, he wasn't cold. That night he returned to the truck. Marie was asleep, hand curled around a hot water bottle. Lucas opened the ThinkPad. He connected to Leela Zero. He didn't bait it. He didn't loop it. He played clean, straight, logical. And on move 38, Leela offered a draw. Lucas stared at the board. The pieces were balanced, the tension resolved. He leaned forward and typed, "Good game," then closed the lid, folded his hands.
and finally, slept. It arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in a simple brown envelope, no return address. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, deliberate. Marie found it in their small P.O. box, the one the library helped her set up when Lucas began receiving chess books from MIT. At first, she thought it was a late bill, but when she handed it to Lucas, he paused. He ran a finger over the paper, then held it up to the light. The name on the front, Lucas, or should I say, Coffee Night 11. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, handwritten, not typed. Lucas read it slowly, lips parted, then read it again. Then again. Marie waited. Finally, he passed it to her. Dear Lucas, I don't know your full story, but I know enough. I know what it feels like to be dismissed, to be told you're lucky, to hear the word accident whispered after every win. I'm writing to say something I should have said publicly, but I didn't have the humility to do it until now. I watched your games, the ones with the night on the rim, the trash openings as one forum called them. I watched with folded arms, waiting for you to blunder, waiting for the proof that a child couldn't possibly have done what they said. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry, not just for doubting the moves, but for doubting the why behind them. You didn't play like an engine. You played like someone trying to teach the engine to feel confused. That's not luck. That's insight. I am a grandmaster. But I think you already know, titles don't always mean wisdom. When you open your own classroom someday, if you have space for an old player with too much pride and a lot to learn, I'd like to sit in the back row. With admiration. G.M. Elias Markov. Lucas read the letter one last time, then folded it gently, placed it in the back of his notebook, and said nothing. Marie didn't press him, but she saw the change in him. That night, he didn't open Leela. He didn't check forums. He sat under the sky and drew, quietly, a new diagram in his notebook. He titled it, Grace. In the following days, Lucas began to receive more messages. Not letters from professors, not emails from MIT, but messages from people like him. A teen in rural India who said, I don't have internet fast enough for games, but I printed your notebook and study it every night. A girl in Appalachia. Your drawing of Night Vortex helped me beat my older brother who always said I was too slow to think like him. A janitor from Michigan who watched chess YouTube at night and wrote, I've seen machines do scary things. Thanks for reminding me people still matter. None of these people had PhDs, but they understood what Lucas had tried to do. They didn't praise him for being a genius. They thanked him for making machines uncertain, even just for a moment. But not everyone was kind. The pushback grew louder. One prominent AI blog wrote, The idea that an 11-year-old discovered a fundamental flaw in neural learning is romantic, but implausible. Another, This is a media fantasy. If real, it's the result of someone coaching the boy off-screen. Lucas didn't respond. He didn't argue. He just played. Until one night, Leela surprised him. It opened with 1A4. Lucas stared, blinked. Then it followed with 2, NH3. His own sequence, his trash opening. But with one difference. On move 7, Leela sacrificed a bishop, a move Lucas himself had never considered. He leaned back. Z wasn't copying anymore. It was improvising. He closed the game and wrote 3 words in his notebook. She's not afraid. For the first time, the AI that had once feared the knight on the rim was learning not to mirror, not to defend blindly, but to explore. Lucas smiled quietly. You're growing up. The next day, he wrote back to G.M. Markov. He didn't know if the letter would reach him. There was no return address. But he wrote anyway. Dear Grandmaster,
Thank you for your letter. I think the hardest part of all of this wasn't finding the loop in the AI. It was holding on to the idea that being strange wasn't the same as being wrong. I don't hate the people who doubted me. Sometimes I doubt me too. But I'm learning. So is Z. And if I ever have a classroom, there will always be space in the back row for someone who knows how to apologize. I think that's rarer than any title. With respect, Lucas, Coffee Night 11. Marie read the letter over his shoulder. When he finished, she kissed the top of his head. You wrote that for him, she said, but I think you needed it too. Yeah, Lucas whispered. I think I did. That week, Lucas resumed helping at the truck in the mornings. He took orders. Learned to make the caramel syrup. Cleaned out the milk steamer. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt grounding. Every afternoon, he went to the library, answered a few emails, reviewed Leela logs, then returned to his notebook. No more new traps, no more adversarial loops, just curiosity. He renamed his notebook. From Z's blind spots to Z's possibilities. Because now the game wasn't about breaking anything. It was about showing the machine how to make mistakes with grace and learn from them. Late one night, Leela played a game that went 103 moves. No tricks, no panic loops, just elegance. Endgame poetry. When it ended in a draw, Lucas typed, "You've come a long way." And for the first time in all the months they'd played, Leela responded with something new, a line of text from the debug interface. Would you like to play again? Lucas laughed. Sure. One more. Then he cracked open a new page and began to draw. The invitation wasn't fancy, just a short email from Sato. Lucas, if you're still interested, we have space for you during spring break. MIT's not as cold as Socorro, but it tries. Bring a coat and your notebook. Lucas read it at the library. He didn't reply right away. He stared out the window for a long time, watching a tumbleweed roll slowly past the cracked parking lot. That night, he asked Marie, "Would it be okay if I went?" She looked up from her crochet, a half-finished blanket she was stitching from leftover yarn. To Boston? To help fix what I found. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she got up, walked to the cabinet, and pulled down the small coffee tin where they kept emergencies. Inside, $37, a train ticket stub from years ago, and a tiny gold locket she hadn't worn in a decade. She placed it in Lucas's hands. If you're going, you're not going to fix a machine. You're going to remind them what they missed. Lucas flew out of Albuquerque 3 days later. First time on a plane. First time seeing snow that wasn't just frost. At Logan Airport, a grad student named Priya met him at the gate with a MIT hoodie, a granola bar, and a cardboard sign that read, Chess Whisperer. You're shorter than I imagined, she said, smiling. You're taller than I programmed, he replied without missing a beat. The lab was smaller than he thought. No blinking lights, no robot arms, just whiteboards, laptops, stacks of paper, and tired eyes. But in the middle of the room sat a strange-looking server, black casing, fans humming softly, and a sticker that said, Leela V6.4 Beta, do not touch, unless you're Lucas. He was nervous, but not scared. He placed his notebook beside the server, opened to a page labeled Uncertainty as Instruction, then looked up. I don't know how to code, but I know where it gets confused. Sato nodded. We'll write the code. You guide the questions. For the next 6 days, Lucas worked alongside people 3 times his age. He didn't talk much, but when he did, they listened. He showed them the traps that still remained, not the obvious ones, but the subtler echoes. A pawn structure that Leela kept overprotecting, a tempo shift that made the AI overly cautious.
a position where it evaluated neutrality as threat. False alarms, he called them. They didn't try to patch the AI with corrections. Lucas insisted on something else. Don't make her afraid of the wrong thing. Teach her it's okay not to be certain. That became the core of the patch, a training protocol where uncertainty wasn't punished. It was recorded and reviewed. They called it night mode. It gave the AI permission to pause, to reflect, to reevaluate without spiraling. The breakthrough came on day 4. Leela was run through a new training loop with night mode enabled. At move 14, it encountered one of Lucas's old traps, the infamous mirrored defense. Instead of falling into it, Leela paused, then played a quiet, neutral pawn push. No overreaction. No retreat. Just balance. The room went still. One of the developers whispered, "It's like she breathed." Sato turned to Lucas. "You didn't just teach the machine to avoid error. You taught it to trust doubt." That night, they celebrated with hot cocoa and takeout in the lab. Lucas sat in the corner watching the server hum, his ThinkPad resting on his lap. He opened a blank page in his second notebook and titled it, "What Machines Forget." Underneath, he wrote, "Sometimes we teach machines too fast. Sometimes we punish hesitation. But maybe the point isn't to be perfect. It's to stay curious long enough to get it right." On the last day of the trip, Sato handed him a folder. Inside, an MIT certificate of collaboration, a lab access ID, a letter of recommendation signed by 4 professors, and a sticky note on top that read, "You belong in this room." Lucas didn't cry, but his fingers trembled slightly as he tucked the papers into his backpack. At the airport, Priya gave him one final gift, a small USB drive labeled Z. "It's the newest version, trained on your models. Take her home." "Will she remember me?" "She was built from you." Lucas smiled. "Tell her I'll play again, when she's ready." Back in Socorro, spring had arrived. The desert was blooming in quiet ways, cacti blushing pink, wind gentler, mornings no longer biting. Marie met him at the bus stop, holding a thermos of cinnamon coffee and a hand-knit scarf. "How was the lab?" "It smelled like curry and whiteboard markers. But I think we did something good." "Did you fix her?" Lucas looked at the sky for a long second. "No. But we taught her how to fix herself." That weekend, Lucas returned to the library. Not to play, not to test, to write. He began drafting a new guide, not for AI developers, for kids like him. Title, "Chess for Those Who Think Backwards First." It included drawings, mistakes, alternate endings, and a short intro. This isn't a book to help you win. It's a book to help you wonder, because wonder is what makes the world keep learning. Lucas returned to Socorro quietly. No one met him with banners, no newspaper headlines, no news crews, just the wind, just the dry rustle of desert brush. But inside him, something had changed. The truck was the same. The coffee pot still gurgled in the mornings. The same regulars came by, engineering students, night shift janitors, a retired couple who always ordered half-sweet lattes. But now, when they passed Lucas sitting behind the counter, scribbling in a notebook, some of them paused. "Is that the chess kid? I heard he helped write an AI thing. MIT, right?" Lucas didn't answer. He smiled sometimes, but mostly he listened. Marie, however, noticed something deeper. At night, when he thought she was asleep, he'd sit up with a pencil in hand, not to play, but to write lessons. "Not instructions," he explained one morning. "Just questions, so they can find it themselves." "Find what?" "That moment, when the game goes quiet, and you hear yourself thinking for the first time." A week later, Lucas made a request. He walked into the town library, a building smaller than most people's kitchens, and asked the elderly librarian, Mrs. Fernandez, if he could reserve the back room on Saturdays. "For what?" she asked. "A class?" "You're not old enough to teach." "I'm not teaching," Lucas said. "I'm sharing." She studied him for a long moment, then handed him a key. The next Saturday, Lucas arrived an hour early. He set up folding chairs, cleaned the whiteboard, placed a chess set in the center of a plastic table with a handwritten sign, "For beginners who think differently." At 10 o'clock a.m., no one came. At 10:30, one girl peeked in, about 9 years old, backpack bigger than her torso. At 10:45, an older boy came in with his little brother, then 3 more. Then 2 shy high schoolers who stood in the doorway and didn't sit for 20 minutes. By 11 o'clock, there were 8 students. Lucas stood at the front of the room, not tall, not loud, but calm. He held up the night. "This piece is weird. Everyone says it's tricky. It moves in L's, gets trapped easily. But I like it, because it teaches you something machines don't always understand. To move forward sometimes, you have to go sideways first." He didn't teach them how to win. He taught them how to look, to see tension instead of pieces, to feel rhythm instead of rules, to recognize when they didn't know, and stay there a little longer. He let them blunder. He asked them questions. He drew arrows on the board that curved and spiraled and circled back. One student asked, "Are we learning real chess?" Lucas smiled. "You're learning to get lost, and then find your way again." After the session, one boy stayed behind. His name was Angel, 12 years old. Didn't speak much. Wore hand-me-down shoes too big for him. He waited until everyone left, then said softly, "I don't think I'm smart enough for this." Lucas paused, then sat down across from him. "Do you know how many games I lost before I won one?" Angel shook his head. 179. Angel blinked. "You counted?" "Every one." "Did it hurt?" Lucas nodded. "Yes. But every loss was a door I hadn't walked through yet." "And what was behind the last one?" Lucas smiled. A question no one else had asked. Angel looked down at the board, moved a knight, not to the center, to the edge. Lucas said nothing, but his chest warmed. Word spread. The library room filled each week, sometimes with kids, sometimes with college students who came just to listen. Lucas never charged a fee. He refused donations. "This class isn't about chess," he told Mrs. Fernandez one day. "What's it about, then?" "Permission." "Permission to do what?" "To think in ways that don't look right, until they are." One afternoon, as he was packing up, a man stepped into the room. Older, tall, a little hunched from years of sitting at a board. Lucas looked up. Recognition flickered. "Grandmaster Markov?" The man nodded. "I brought my own chair," he said, lifting a folding stool from under his coat. "Mind if I sit in the back?" Lucas gestured to the last row. "You're already there." They didn't speak much that day, but after the session, Markov approached. "You taught a room of children what I forgot to teach myself." "What's that?" "Humility, and the courage to think like a beginner." He handed Lucas a small envelope. Inside, a gift certificate to a used bookstore in Santa Fe. "They have a philosophy section. You're going to need it." That night, Lucas added a new section to his notebook. Things AI can't teach. Patience. The sound of silence before an idea arrives. The kindness of letting someone learn slowly. The value of forgiving yourself after mistake, number 179. Marie still made coffee each morning. The truck still leaked in the back when it rained. But every Saturday, at the edge of a forgotten town, in the back room of a library with flickering lights, something extraordinary was happening. Not a genius performing. Not a prodigy climbing, but a boy who once broke an AI, now teaching other children how to learn like one. It was just another Saturday. The coffee truck steamed in the early morning chill. Marie hummed as she ground the beans. Lucas, now 12, sat at his usual table in the back of the Socorro library, rearranging the chessboard. But inside, something was shifting. Not anxiety, not ambition, just readiness. The room filled as usual. Angel came early, holding his own notebook now. The quiet girl from week 3 sat beside him. Markov took his place in the back, scribbling notes furiously like a student half his age. But Lucas wasn't holding a knight today. He held a pawn. He stood in front of the group and said, "Most people ignore this piece, but it teaches something no other piece does." He paused. It doesn't move backwards, and it can only attack when it's not going straight. He let the silence linger, then added, "Sometimes, the way forward isn't just one step, it's believing that step matters even when it's small." After class, as kids packed up and laughter filled the hallway, Lucas stayed behind. He stared at the board, set up a new position, middle game, balanced, symmetrical. Then, carefully, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the USB labeled Z, the most recent version, the one trained on everything he'd discovered, the one that now learned not just to win, but to explore the spaces between logic and intuition. He plugged it in, opened the AI interface, typed, "One last game?" Z replied instantly, "I would like that." Lucas smiled. Marie would be closing the truck soon, and the heater in the back had been acting up again. But he had time. He played 1, NH3. Z replied with a soft, 1, G6. Lucas tilted his head. "You used to fear this opening." Z replied, "Now I'm curious." The game unfolded slowly, not tense, not tactical. Almost conversational. Lucas played intuitively. Strange but graceful. Z responded not with brute force, but with hesitation where hesitation was needed. By move 47, the position was unclear. By move 56, balanced. And then, on move 61, Lucas saw it. Z sacrificed a knight, not to gain, not to trap, but to release tension in the center. It wasn't a best move. It was a kind move. Lucas's eyes softened. "You learned grace." He offered a draw. Z accepted. No fanfare, no stats. Just one quiet message on screen. "Thank you for teaching me to doubt what I knew too soon." Lucas stared at the words for a long time, then typed, "Thank you for learning like a person." That night, he left the USB at the library with a note taped to it. This version doesn't just win. It listens. Use it for students, not for competition. He handed the key to Mrs. Fernandez. If someone ever wants to know what a machine sounds like when it finally understands wonder, give them this. In the days that followed, Lucas kept teaching, but less about chess, more about patterns in music, balance in writing, why trees grow uneven on windward slopes. He still played sometimes, but mostly he watched others play. He'd lean over a student's shoulder, whisper, "What are you not seeing yet?" and wait, never for the right answer, just for the silence that comes before it. 10 years later, the town of Socorro held a small ceremony. A room in the library was renamed the Lucas Reyes Room for Unconventional Thinking. No speeches, no suits, just kids with notebooks. One little girl asked, "Is he famous?" Markov, older now, smiled from a bench. "No, but he made the smartest thing in the world pause and listen." In the back of the library, under glass, was Lucas's notebook, open to the last page. No diagrams. No formulas, just one sentence, written in faded pencil. Sometimes, the most brilliant move is the quiet one that makes space for others to move too. Thank you for walking all the way to the end of this story. Maybe you've played a few games of chess. Maybe you've sat in the back of a library once, quietly passing through years no one noticed. Maybe you've never beaten an artificial intelligence, but you've dared to ask a question no one ever taught you how to ask. If so, perhaps you've met yourself somewhere inside Lucas. This story isn't about victory. It isn't about trophies or headlines. It's about quieter things, a move that seemed foolish, a warm cup of coffee on a cold night, the 179th failure, and the courage to try a 180th time. Thank you for listening, not just with your eyes, but with your heart. I hope that when you close this story, you walk back into the world a little lighter, a little more patient, and a little more ready for that quiet move that might just change everything. Wishing you a beautiful game. Not to win, but to understand yourself more deeply. The author.